Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Safe and Sound Texas audio excursion. Today it's a vinyl shootout, and it's a classic 1967 album released by the Moody Blues, Days of Future Past. I'm going to be shooting out 5 vinyl versions of this record, and the results are coming up next. So one of the things I do with my members only channel is release a daily video. And today the daily video release is related to the shootout of Days of Future Past. Now the reason is I actually am showing them some of the content related to my impressions of this, the actual 5.1 DTS CD, which is a multi-channel disc for this album. So one of the benefits of being a member is some of this additional content. So check it out on my channel. A lot of great content there. And again, it's less than a cup of coffee or a good cup of coffee a month, but yet you can get a daily audio diet. So every day I'm almost to 100 of these videos that I've done. Appreciate your consideration. But back to the shootout. So I've got 5 of these puppies, and you'll notice one thing is that some of the covers on these are different. This was the original cover as released in the UK, but in the United States, let me pull that one out. It was released with this particular heading on top and then the image below it. So it was somewhat different between the releases in the US and in Europe. But we're always concerned about what's inside the cover, the actual records. So I'm going to go through these. There have been a few surprises, I think, which is always good and interesting to have with these. I think we have a fairly decisive winner with a decent runner-up, and the rest pretty much are, really don't have to consider those. So at least we've narrowed it down, and that's what we try to do. Now, I also am going to be dropping a video which I gave to members a few days ago that has to do with how I do my shootout process with more details. And the reason is you'll see these have sticky notes on them, and they have a letter with them. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that this is how these are blindly done for me. I will be comparing record A to B to C to D to E, because these are in fact camouflaged in a way to where I don't know which one I'm listening to. I just mark down my findings, and here it is. I mark down my findings as I'm going through it with those pseudonyms of letters against each one that is on the 2 different turntables. So trying to provide as much objectivity and blind type listening to these, because I don't put the labels on, so I don't know which ones they are when they're going on the turntable. So let's see how the numbers turn out for this one. The nature of audio comparisons is that the results presented in this video are fully subjective. They are based on my equipment in my listening room using my hearing capability. Therefore, your results may be different. My effort here is to provide you the relative difference of audio characteristics across various pressings. 5 contenders, A through E. As you saw, that's how the album covers were marked, and then the actual labels I had marked over with a round paper around it that gave it just the letter and side indicator. So going into this blindly, I had A as a reissue from Polygram from their imported Audiophile series. These were made in 1981, pressed by Philips in Amsterdam, Holland, on high-density special vinyl. Those are going for about $40 a pop. U.S. first press was B. Lacquer was cut at Bell South Studios, and it was pressed at Monarch Record Pressing. That is a 1968 release and a cheap $10 to $15, $12 average kind of album. C is the most expensive. That was Speaker's Corner's reissue. Lacquer cut at Decca Studios by Anthony Hawkins, pressed at Palace, Germany, released in 1998. It goes for around $80. D is the Mobile Fidelity or MFSL back in the day 1981 reissue, remastered by Stan Ricker and of course pressed at JVC in Japan. Last but not least was E, the UK first pressing with a lacquer cut at Decca Studios by Harry Fisher, while the LP itself was pressed at Decca's pressing plant in the UK. Another under $20 record released in 1967. On the relative decibel level, a couple of them set kind of a baseline. B and C were about the same. But then we had the A. Phillips reissue. Audiophile was a tad quieter, and the Mobile Fidelity was quite a bit quieter, minus 3 dB there as opposed to 1 on the Polygram. But the UK was hottest of all. It was plus 2 compared to the Speaker's Corner and the U.S. first pressing. As far as vinyl quietness goes there, Polygram got an 8, even though it was on density special vinyl, as they said. We had a 7 on the U.S. It was a little bit noisy. 9 on Speaker's Corner. It was fairly quiet, as was the Mobile Fidelity. And the UK was an 8. It was not quite as bad as the U.S., but it did have a little bit of surface noise. Getting into the sonics of the bass, mid, and treble, this is where things get interesting. The Polygram was humming along okay, and then the treble stuff really started to fall off, when we were comparing it, and noticed that it really was, in fact, lacking compared to the others, which is odd for an audiophile press, quote unquote. So it got an 8 for bass, 8.5 for mid, and 7.5 for treble. So not even consistent there. Whereas the U.S. pressing, the bass and the mids were okay. They were 8s, but the treble was just over the top a bit. It was just annoying, a bit cringing, as I wrote down. So it got that 10.5, which when you're over the 10 mark, then you're getting negative points towards your average. So it isn't helping you at all when you're over 10. Speaker's Corner was really very solid here, 9.5s across the board. Very good representation of the audio spectrum across all of the frequencies. I think that was one of its merits, and the balance of that was very, very smooth. The Mobile Fidelity was similar, but not quite as strong, not quite as well defined, even with volume matching and bringing it up to be the same volume because of its minus 3 dB. There was still more accuracy with the Speaker's Corner. And then we get to the UK. It was okay, 8s on the mids and the bass, but the treble again was weak, kind of like that Phillips, kind of like the ones that had the odd cover had less treble in them. It's just the way it sounded, although I didn't know it at the time. Moving on to dynamic range, we got an 8 for the Polygram. It was pretty good. The U.S. pressing was a little bit thinner, a little more compressed, it seemed like to me. I think that contributed to putting up the highs a little bit hot there, too. Didn't help that at all. Speaker's Corner was a nice 9. Dynamic range was solid. I think it was good. I think it was good for the recording of the time to be done. Mobile Fidelity was decent. It was an 8, but it wasn't as good as the Speaker's Corner. It just really didn't have that breath that we got out of the Speaker's Corner. And the UK was an 8. It was pretty decent, but It wasn't, again, it really didn't stack up as well against the Speaker's Corner. There were some oddities here, and I really want to zoom in on a couple of them here because I made some very specific notes. The keyboard section on side 2, track 2, was very blurry sounding on both the Polygram import A and the UK. So I don't know if there's a tape issue or what it was, but some of those keyboards were like rolled over, kind of lost. And man, when you compared it to the others, it was like, where did that go? It just was really very evident. So it's kind of hard to account for it numerically, but it just seemed like that there was just something missing in those two pressings, A and E, in that area. Just wanted to point that out because it was quite pronounced. Soundstage was decent on the Polygram, and had some breath to it, but it wasn't nearly as good as Speaker's Corner at 9.5, and the US was even worse at a 7. I think again some potential compression there might have affected it. The mobile fidelity was an 8.5. It was good, but it was, when you really went side by side against the Speaker's Corner, you really realize that the Speaker's Corner had the edge quite materialistically in terms of the sound. And the UK was 7.5. It was not great in dynamics at all either. It was a louder record, but couldn't make up for it in soundstage and imaging because it just didn't have that depth and dimension that the Speaker's Corner and the MoFi did. And then the voices, we got a couple of 8s on the Polygram and the US. They were decently represented, but again, the Speaker's Corner came out at a 9. It was definitely more precise and gave you the voice qualities and inflections as well as just some openness to it, some breadth and depth to it. And the MoFi was 8.5. It was decent at this, better than the others, but not really as good as the Speaker's Corner once again. In the UK, actually a 7 on the voices. So you're seeing a pattern here. It had more muffling, I guess I would say, with the voices in the UK version, ironically. The Sonics averages then take you for the Polygram to be an 8 for that audiophile version, and the US was a 7.1, while the Speaker's Corner really jammed it up to a 9.33. That's the one to get, and the mobile fidelity is about a half point less, a little more at 8.67, and then the UK was 7.67. It was fourth, with the US being last. And similar kind of reflections, I think, from when you look at the vinyl quietness, because the Speaker's Corner was decently, the MoFi jumps up a little bit because of it. But I think you can see your Speaker's Corner is definitely the one to go after, even though it's a little pricier. It's paying almost $9 a point, $8.50 a point, but you definitely get it. You definitely get the sound that you really want there. And it was really the only one that even came close to competing with the DTS CD in any way, shape, or form. So the winner, Speaker's Corner, Record C. These are those labels I use. Put them on the label itself, cover it up so I don't know what record I'm looking at. But it was C in this case that was the winner, and it took home the gold. This particular process that I'm using now provides the most objectivity I think I can provide, as well as some other setups that I do related to this, which I'll be showing you in a video about my process, which I'll be dropping for all subscribers or anyone who wants to watch within the next 24 hours. It was available to members only as of yesterday. So again, if you're not a member, please consider doing so. It's right next to the subscribe button on my homepage when you go to the homepage via a browser on a PC or a Mac. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so by clicking on the bell below, and a thumbs up or like is appreciated, as are your comments. So as always, thanks for watching today on the Safe and Sound Texas Audio Excursion. And I will be on an excursion for the next 3 weeks, bringing you some unique locations and videos, a pressing plant or two, some engineers that I'm going to be visiting in their mastering studios, and more. So please stay tuned to the channel. And thanks for watching as always, and take care, everybody.